The Israeli army announced the end of the main stage of the operation, al-Bashan, to destroy the strategic capabilities of the Syrian army. During the operation, 70 to 80% of the military capabilities of the Assad regime were destroyed. The purpose of the operation was to prevent strategic weapons from falling into the hands of enemy forces, Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, said. The operation started on the night leading to Sunday. Isarel's Air Force and Navy carried out over 350 strikes against strategic targets in Syria during the operation. Rocket carriers of the Israeli Navy simultaneously struck dozens of strikes at 2 bases of the Syrian Navy, destroying dozens of combat aircraft and helicopters, radars, air defense systems, 15 warships, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, dozens of anti-ship missiles with a range of 80 to 190 kilometers, surface-to-surface missiles, drones, warehouses and weapons manufacturing plants. The military struck anti-aircraft batteries, Air Force fields belonging to the Syrian military, and weapons production facilities in Damascus, Homs, Latakia, Palmyra, and Tartus. The IDF also degraded cruise missiles, surface-to-sea missiles, UAVs, fighter jets, radars, tanks, and attack helicopters, among other things. Earlier, it was reported that most of the strikes were in southern Syria and around the city of Damascus, targeting Syrian army bases, with an emphasis on air defense systems and stores of surface-to-surface and surface-to-air missiles. Israeli security sources indicate that these actions have significantly expanded the Air Force's operational freedom. 2 Syrian security sources told Reuters that IAF jets had struck at least 3 major Syrian army air bases that housed dozens of helicopters and jets. The Kamishli Air Base in northeast Syria, the Shinshar Base in the countryside of Homs, and the Akraba Airport southwest of the capital Damascus were all hit, the sources said. The Air Force also reportedly carried out several strikes on a research center on the outskirts of Damascus and a center for electronic warfare near the Sayyida Zainab area of the capital.
Russian troops in Syria are having a hard time since the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime. They have found themselves in the crosshairs of not only local militias but also Israel. This was reported by the Russian Z-blogger Fighter Bomber, associated with the Russian Aerospace Forces. Russia obviously was not ready to overthrow Assad. The evacuation of troops and equipment is taking place in complete chaos, despite the fact that the local opposition and Turkey have given Russia guarantees of immunity and time to leave the country. Some groups of the Russian armed forces have been surrounded. Some of the military came under attack from the Israel Defense Forces. Fighter Bomber denied the statement by the chairman of the State Duma Committee on Defense, Andrei Kartapolov, that their military contingent in Syria is allegedly not under any threat. I would like to address our Israeli partners. Please don't hit Syrian airfields yet. Some of them have our servicemen who we remember, but no one told you about them. And with your strikes, you can kill them a little. So far, we've gotten away with it, but there's no need to repeat it. Then you can smash everything there into rubble, wrote the Russian Z-blogger. It should be noted that there are 2 Russian military bases in Syria, the Khmeimim Air Base and the Tartus Naval Base. Russian troops are also dispersed in small groups at other military facilities throughout the country. At the moment, an urgent evacuation of soldiers and equipment is underway. The Russians were not allowed to maintain a military presence in Syria. Syrian media reports say Israeli warplanes have carried out dozens of attacks across the country, including in the capital Damascus. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said there were more than 100 strikes on military targets. A research center with suspected links to chemical weapons production was among the sites hit, according to local media reports. Israel says it is acting to stop weapons falling into the hands of extremists following the overthrow of the Assad regime. The strikes come as the UN's chemical watchdog warns authorities in Syria to ensure that suspected stockpiles of chemical weapons are safe. According to the UN's chemical watchdog, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, a chemical weapon is a chemical used to cause intentional death or harm through its toxic properties. The use of chemical weapons is prohibited under international humanitarian law, regardless of the presence of a valid military target, as the effects of such weapons are indiscriminate by nature. It is not known where or how many chemical weapons Syria has, but it's believed former President Bashar al-Assad kept stockpiles and that the declaration he had made was incomplete. The situation in Syria has forced Russia to urgently withdraw its military contingent from bases in the country. These forces may end up on the front line in Ukraine, but will not significantly affect the overall situation, said Andrei Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council. According to him, as of the summer of 2024, there were about 6,000 to 7,500 Russian military personnel in Syria, including representatives of private military companies. Accordingly, even if all these military personnel are transferred to the Russian Federation with subsequent dispatch to the war against Ukraine, this will not significantly affect the situation at the front, given the rather high daily losses of the Russian army in assault operations. Moreover, some of these soldiers may be transferred to Africa, Kovalenko noted. As ISW analysts note, after the fall of the Assad regime, Putin may lose his military bases in Syria, and this threatens the Kremlin with serious consequences. According to analysts, the loss of Russian bases in Syria will likely disrupt Russian logistics as well as its efforts to replenish supplies and rotate the Africa Corps. Russia's operations and power projection in Libya and sub-Saharan Africa will be particularly affected. The fate of Russian military bases in Syria, including the key port of Tartus, has been effectively sealed. According to Landsat satellite images published by OSINT analyst M.T. Anderson, Russian warships have retreated 8 kilometers from the shore. The images, taken on December the 8th and 9th, confirm that all Russian ships are at anchor in the Mediterranean. Dara Masikot, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, believes that the ships are leaving to ensure their safety amid the growing threat from Syrian rebels. Russian military expert Vasily Dandikin had previously said that the naval squadron had gone to the open sea due to an unpredictable situation in the region. The images published by M.T. Anderson were the first documentary confirmation of this information. The withdrawal of Russian ships from Tartus underscores the precariousness of Russia's position in Syria. The fate of bases, including the Khmeimim air base, remains in question. Rebels whom Russia has been fighting for nearly a decade now occupy key positions in the region and could launch attacks on military installations. Of particular concern are the risks of the rebels capturing Russian equipment, including Su-34 and Su-35 fighters and bombers. If the bases are not evacuated in a timely manner, the military equipment may fall into the hands of the new authorities, which will be a significant blow to the prestige and capabilities of the Russian military-industrial complex.